McGraw-Hill Professional presents The Expansion Sale. 4 must-win conversations to keep and grow your customers. Written by Erik Peterson and Tim Riesterer, in collaboration with Dr. Nick Lee, Rob Perillion, Joe Collins, Doug Hutton, and Leslie Talbot. Narrated by Susan Marlowe. Research note. One thing that always struck us about much academic research is that it's, well, academic. Researchers tend to study the most readily available subjects, which tend to be graduate students, gamblers, and convicts. While that might be great for getting access to a captive audience, no pun intended, we had to wonder how real-world the results really are. What's the use of doing B2B research if you're not tapping a B2B research subject pool? That's why, throughout this book, you'll see that our study results report on simulations conducted with actual business people, including executive buyers. You know, the people you actually want to become your customers. In addition, we're very much proponents of decision science. There's a lot that's been written about the best practices approach to research, but that means you're starting with a built-in bias around what the right answer is. One thing we have learned from our research is that the right answer is often the most counterintuitive answer. Starting with an ideal of what a best practice is will skew that perspective. Best practices are also inherently lagging practices. It can take years to identify something as a best practice, and by that time, it's a common practice. Best practices also suffer from being inherently company-centric and regional. Decision science, on the other hand, is completely focused on the buyers and their behavior, and it's also timeless and globally applicable. Finally, although you see we do use some industry surveys in our research, we don't rely on those surveys to generate results. For us, surveys are simply one window into the customer's current thinking. In fact, one thing we know is that there's often a gap between what people say they believe, declared preferences, and what they actually do, revealed preferences. Within that gap is where some of our most startling counterintuitive results originate, and that's what our scientific simulations aim to uncover. Of course, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to our research partners, Dr. Nick Lee, a co-author of this book, and Dr. Zachary Tormala, who participated in some of the early research studies around retention and renewal. Dr. Nick Lee is Professor of Marketing at Warwick Business School in Coventry, UK. He has spent nearly 20 years drawing from social psychology, cognitive neuroscience, economics, and philosophy to develop insights into salespeople and selling. Dr. Zachary Tormala is a social psychologist with expertise in the areas of messaging and persuasion. He was contracted by Corporate Visions to create this research, conduct the experiments, and help ensure academic rigor and empirically valid results. Dr. Tormala is a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Foreword. For buyers, the subscription economy promised manageable prices for instant value. Prohibitively costly goods could be had immediately for lower recurring payments. The barriers to entry and exit were lower, so buyers were no longer locked into bad deals by huge investments. But what about the promise this bargain made to vendors? As long as you were meeting the customer's needs, the lifetime value of the relationship could grow, infinitely in theory, and customers would renew automatically forever. However, I recently heard a poignant quote from a head of sales. In a competitive market, renewals are really resells. That's a troubling premise for recurring revenue businesses. If renewals are no longer automatic, that means the renewal conversation is suddenly a critical moment in every customer relationship. And that's where this incredible book comes in. It makes a compelling case that renewals are resells, but it goes further to show that the sales motion you used to close the acquisition sale is not the sales motion you should use to close the expansion sale. Just as the subscription economy demanded changes in your support model, your financial model, and your product development model, it also needs to drive a change in your selling model. Erik and Tim and their company Corporate Visions have devoted the last several years to conducting some of the most rigorous studies ever done on B2B selling, and they've uncovered some compelling insights into precisely what's different about the selling motion for an existing customer versus an acquisition prospect. In this book, they turn those insights into tactics that every company should build into their customer engagement and expansion plans. But, speaking as a geek for all things scientific, my favorite part of the book is all the fascinating insight into buying and selling psychology. I hope you'll find it as captivating as I did. Nick Mehta, Chief Executive Officer, Gainsight. Introduction. As a native Midwesterner, one of our authors, Tim, grew up with an unhealthy phobia of tornadoes. Thankfully, his town had the foresight to install a siren warning system that would alert the populace, all 600 souls, to a looming threat should the occasion arise. The town tested the siren every day at noon, sounding a minute-long, ear-shattering blast, rain or shine. Yet, somehow the townspeople managed to ignore the piercing wail and go about their business, a few fondly referring to it as the noon whistle. Then, one memorable day, the skies darkened, the clouds began to rumble, and the siren went off at 3 p.m. This was it, the real deal. And 13 panicked teenagers who had been playing ball in the park sprang into action. Instead of ignoring the siren, the kids jumped on their bikes and pedaled as fast as they could to get home to the safety of their basements, more than a few crying for their mommies, according to a reliable eyewitness. Thankfully, no tornado touched down in that little town that afternoon, and none have officially touched down in its entire 200-year history. But in that frantic moment, a lesson in marketing, sales, and customer service was born. Turns out, it wasn't about the siren at all. It was about the context of the situation the siren was in. It's a phenomenon called the context effect. The context effect is the influence of environmental factors on the perception of a stimulus. No one cared about the screeching siren when it was doing its thing at noon every day, but when the situation changed to threatening, everyone cared and responded accordingly. It was the different environment that made the siren irrelevant one minute and invaluable the next. It had nothing to do with the tensile strength of the horn or the decibel levels it put out. The context effect is essential to marketing, selling, and customer success as well. It's not your products or services that get people to respond. It's their environmental factors, their current situation, that determine their perception of your solution. Chief among these environmental factors is whether they are a prospect doing something else with someone else, or perhaps doing nothing at all with anyone, or whether they are your existing customer doing that thing with you. The context effect calls for you to develop and deliver a message differently to prospects versus existing customers. After all, their environment is very different when it comes to responding to your stimulus, your products and services. Wait, you say you don't message differently or you're unsure of the distinction? Then you've come to the right place. This book is for you, and it will completely change your perspective on and approach to marketing, sales, and customer success. Inside, you'll find brand new exclusive research on the difference between customer acquisition and customer expansion messaging. While many books have been written about how to get new customers, this is the first to show you how to keep and grow the customers you already have. After all, according to many analysts, your existing customers represent 70 to 80% of your revenue and growth opportunities. So it's critical you get these customer conversations right. Yet, most companies take the same one-size-fits-all approach to marketing, sales, and customer success when renewing and upselling existing customers as they did to acquire them in the first place. Recent research proves this will backfire badly. In fact, the psychology of the existing customer is 180 degrees different from the psychology of a prospect. That means the stories and skills you use to communicate with them need to be 180 degrees different as well. 4 must-win commercial moments. There are several things you must do after winning a new customer that are vital to the customer's experience and satisfaction, including onboarding, change management, adoption and utilization, not to mention ensuring your customer achieves the results you promised. While these are important, this book doesn't focus on these day-to-day customer success activities. Instead, it focuses entirely on the 4 must-win commercial moments in every customer relationship. 1. Renewals. 2. Price increases. 3. Upsells. 4. Apologies. These are the acute scenarios in which you rally your organization's marketing, sales, and customer success resources to keep and grow your customers. They're also the tense situations that register highest on the revenue Richter scale, where much of your and your company's success hangs in the balance. It's in these moments you need tested, proven, customer conversation message frameworks and skills, rooted in decision-making science and the invisible forces that shape how people frame value and make choices. And that's what you'll get in this book. Specific, practical, actionable approaches to create and deliver your message for maximum impact in these make-or-break moments. Part 1. Developing the expansion message. In this section, you'll learn the brain science behind developing effective communications for the 4 must-win commercial moments in customer expansion. Getting your customers to renew with you, why stay? Asking them to accept a price increase and stick with you, why pay more? Convincing them to upgrade or buy more from you, why evolve? And getting them to accept your apology for a service problem. Why forgive? Whether you're a marketer, a seller, or a customer success professional, these must-win customer conversations all too often happen by accident rather than on purpose. But if you follow the frameworks in the following chapters, you will be able to build messages that have been tested and proven to increase your chances of keeping and growing your existing customers. Chapter 1. Acquisition does not equal expansion. Sometimes we joke that people get into marketing, sales, or customer success to avoid science and math. Yet, it turns out you need a lot of science, and sadly, quite a bit of math, to truly understand how to influence people's buying decisions. There's even an entire area of study devoted to the topic. It's called decision science, and it explores the invisible forces that shape how human beings frame value and make choices. If you've read our previous books, Conversations That Win the Complex Sale and The 3 Value Conversations, you learned how to use the power of neuroscience, social psychology, and behavioral economics to convince prospects to change and choose you. In this book, you're going to see how you can harness those same hidden forces to convince prospects to expand their existing business with you. But this time, there's a twist. The principles of decision science still apply to renewal and expansion conversations, but new research conducted with our partners, Dr. Zachary Tormala and Dr. Nick Lee, proves that you need to approach these conversations in a radically different way. This revelation will likely surprise everyone who's bought into the hype around provocation-based selling that has dominated sales and marketing over the past decade. It certainly surprised us. However, when we stepped back and re-examined the science, it made perfect sense. Status quo bias. Disrupt or defend. It all starts with a scientifically proven decision-making concept called status quo bias. In our previous books, we shared the 4 reasons why people don't change their minds, why they prefer to stick with their status quo. Our research showed that you need to disrupt and defeat status quo bias when you are attempting to poach a prospect from a competitor or do-it-yourselfer. However, our newest studies demonstrated that you must actually defend and reinforce status quo bias when you are, well, the status quo. That's because prospects and customers are answering different questions in their minds. The prospects want to know why they need to change and do something different, and why they need to do it now, not later. Meanwhile, your existing customers are asking themselves different questions. They are trying to determine why they should stay with you and possibly buy more from you. In each environment, the factors, context effect, are different, meaning the psychology of your audience is different. The questions you must answer are different. That means the resulting stories and skills must be different. As reinforcement for those of you who read our previous books, and in preparation for those of you who are new to our work, here's a quick refresher on status quo bias and how you must disrupt it to answer the why change question for a prospect. In his paper, The Psychology of Doing Nothing, research psychologist Christopher J. Anderson detailed 4 causes or antecedents of status quo bias: preference stability, perceived cost of change, selection difficulty, and anticipated regret and blame. This is a useful starting point for anyone looking to understand how status quo bias informs buying decisions, when it's necessary to disrupt or defend it, and, most importantly, how to do so. 1. Preference stability. People naturally dislike uncertainty. They made previous decisions that became their preferences. As a result, any new information that threatens those preferences and their stability must be resolved quickly. The typical words you may hear when a prospect is reestablishing preference stability are such comments as, "This seems a lot like the way I'm already doing it," or, "This seems a lot like what everyone else is saying." Hearing the word "like" might be a good thing in social media posts, but it's a problem in selling. Introducing uncertainty about your prospect's status quo is a prerequisite for change, but their natural reaction will be to avoid it, push back, and try to resolve it in their minds. Even though they accept that their current approach might not be perfect, they will rationalize that it isn't bad enough to take on the risk of a big change management project. 2. Perceived cost of change. Your prospects see their status quo as free. It's viewed as just part of their operating budget and internal operating rhythm or cadence. They don't have to think about it too much. If they were to consider a change, your prospects imagine all the new costs they might encounter. Additional budget money may be needed to pay for the startup costs that they already paid when they purchased the existing solution. Furthermore, there are the added costs associated with onboarding, training, and process changes required to accommodate any solution changeout. And then factor in the time and effort required to build consensus among all the decision makers and users. Making the change looks like it will cost them money, time, and stomach lining. Again, while the existing approach may not be perfect, they think doing that new thing with that new provider is a hard, risky change management project not worth this added cost to them or their company. 3. Selection difficulty. The amount of information your prospect must sift through and process to make a buying decision is overwhelming. Most marketers and sellers don't help this situation when they keep piling on the messaging and content during a selling process. At some point, the prospect shuts down and declares all providers the same, essentially shutting down the deal at the same time. The decision-making part of the brain is very simple and doesn't even contain the capacity for language. What it needs and what it's looking for is clear contrast between what people are already doing today and what you are recommending. People won't make a decision to change if they think they are getting something similar to their current approach. Their thought process goes like this: change is so risky and costly. Why would I go through all that just to get something that is more or less the same as what I already have? 4. Anticipated regret and blame. The fourth cause of status quo bias is very insidious. Deep down, your prospects may know their current approach isn't perfect and even agree that, on paper, your solution is better. But they worry about what will happen if the change doesn't go well. The subconscious thinking goes this way: what we're doing today isn't perfect, but hey, at least I'm not dead yet. That change management project you are proposing and I'm sponsoring, that thing could kill me. Of course, they don't mean this literally, but the brain's natural survival mechanism kicks in at some point in the process and assesses the risk of making the change compared with the pains of staying the same. And the very real pressure of risk aversion threatens to stop all your progress. The myth of the emotionless executive. There's a widespread assumption that seasoned business executives are rational decision makers. They assess risks and weigh rewards with a keen, calculating eye and make coldly logical choices based on hard numbers. They might use different criteria when weighing a personal decision, or so the thinking goes. But when it comes to business, it's just the facts, ma'am. We wondered how valid those assumptions are. After all, executives are human beings. Don't their brains follow the same scientific rules as everyone else's? Since selling to the C-suite is near the top of all our clients' wish lists, we decided to study how emotion, specifically humans' natural loss aversion, affects decisions made at the highest level of an organization. In partnership with Dr. Zachary Tormala, we constructed a research study with 113 executives from a cross-section of industries around the world. We asked the executives to each imagine that they were an auto manufacturing executive whose business was experiencing hard times and needed to make a difficult decision about closing plants and eliminating jobs. With their current status quo, there was a risk of needing to close up to 3 plants and losing up to 6,000 jobs. While each executive had that same starting point, from there, the executives were split into 2 groups. Both groups would hear very similar options for what they might do to improve the plant and job situation, but the options would be framed differently depending on which group the executive was in. One group would have its status quo presented in a gain frame, and one group would have its status quo presented in a loss frame. We'll show you how those frames were worded so you can see what was different between the two. The first group was told it had 2 options. Plan A would save 1 out of 3 plants and 2,000 jobs. Plan B was a riskier option. Plan B gave the executives a 33% chance of saving all 3 plants and 6,000 jobs. But there was also a 66% chance that it would actually save none of the plants or jobs. Presented with these 2 plans, 74% chose the option presented in Plan A, saving 1 plant and 2,000 jobs. Only 26% chose Plan B, the riskier option that had a 33% chance of saving all the jobs and plants, but a 66% chance that it might save none of the jobs or plants. The second group of executives was presented with the exact same situation, but this time with a loss frame. Note that the math was exactly the same, only the words were changed. This second group saw Plan A framed as a loss statement. 2 out of 3 plants would be lost along with 4,000 jobs. And the same thing was changed about Plan B. The math for Plan B was the same for both groups, but in the second group, the words were framed as a loss scenario. A 66% chance of losing all 3 plants and 6,000 jobs, and a 33% chance of losing none of the plants and none of the jobs. What's interesting is how the choices are different between the 2 groups. In this second group, when the status quo, Plan A, was framed as a loss, Instead of 74% going with Plan A, now only 55% were.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?